That water is a community amenity, and your dock comes down by Friday or we cut it down for you. That was Sharon Delk, president of the Pinecrest Ridge Homeowners Association, standing at the end of my driveway on a Tuesday morning in a coral blazer and white sneakers that had never seen a day of mud. She said it to me about a lake my family had owned since before her subdivision was a line on anybody's map. She had a clipboard. She had a folded notice in a plastic sleeve. She had a man from the county standing 2 steps behind her with his thumbs hooked in his belt, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. What Sharon did not know, what she never once thought to check in the 3 years she spent trying to take my shoreline, was that the man she was lecturing about property lines had spent 31 years as a licensed land surveyor, and that the original boundary survey of that entire basin, the one filed and recorded at the county before her husband ever poured a foundation, had been walked, measured, and signed by me. So let me ask you something before I tell you the rest. If a woman with a clipboard told you to tear down the dock your wife helped you build, on water you had the recorded paper to prove was yours, and she had a county man standing behind her to make it feel official, what would you have done? Would you have argued on the driveway? Or would you have gone inside, made a pot of coffee, and started a folder? I made coffee. Then I started a folder. My name is Walt Brennan. I was 63 years old that summer, and I had lived on the north shore of Clearwater Lake for most of my life. The lake sat in a high granite bowl in the mountains, fed by snowmelt and 3 cold springs, ringed by pine on every side but the south, where the land flattened into meadow. My grandfather bought the original parcel in 1941, 212 acres that wrapped the entire north and east of the water. He paid for it over 9 years with money from a sawmill job, and he walked the whole boundary on foot with a county man and a chain before he ever signed. Because he didn't trust a line, he hadn't stepped himself. He logged a little, ran a few cattle, and built the first cabin with his own hands from timber off his own slope. My father added the well and the road and the second room on the cabin. I added a license, a profession, and 40 years of knowing exactly where every line on that mountain ran. Because measuring land was the work I did for a living. 3 generations, and not one of us ever lost a foot of it. I did not intend to be the first. I married Diane in 1984. She was a school teacher down in the valley, and she used to say she married a man who would rather talk to a benchmark than a person. And she wasn't entirely wrong. We raised 1 daughter in that house, and when our daughter grew up and moved to the coast, it was just the 2 of us and the water and the long evenings on the dock. Diane and I built 1 board at a time, the summer she turned 50. I remember that summer the way you remember a good job done right. We bought the lumber a little at a time so as not to spook the budget. Cedar that smelled like the inside of a cigar box. And Diane insisted on setting every piling herself. Said if her name was going to be on it, she wanted her hands on it. She measured worse than me and laughed about it. And the dock has a 1/4-inch dogleg in the 3rd section to this day, where she fought me on a reading and won. I never fixed it. I never will. She passed 4 years before Sharon Delk ever knocked on my door. Cancer, quick and unfair, 11 weeks from the diagnosis to the morning she didn't wake up. The last good day she had, we sat at the end of that dock with our feet in the water, and she made me promise I would keep the place whole, not sell off a corner to anybody, keep the line my grandfather drew. I told her I would. The dock was the last thing we made together. And I want you to understand that going in, because Sharon picked, out of 212 acres, the one object on that whole property that would have hurt the most to lose. She didn't know what it was. That was the thing about Sharon. She never knew what anything was. She only knew what it looked like from her deck. I had a granddaughter by then, too. Her name was Maddie, and she was 15 the summer this all started. Her mother went through a hard divorce out on the coast, the kind that hollows a person out for a year or two. And Maddie came to spend that summer and then the school year with me. Because the mountain was quiet, and her mother needed it quiet for her. She showed up in June with one duffel bag and a phone she barely looked up from. And I figured I was in for a long, sullen season of a teenager stuck on a mountain with an old man. I was wrong about that inside of a week. Maddie took to the lake the way kids do, all in, no half measures. She fished off the dock at dawn, taught herself off videos, and by August she was out fishing me, which she enjoyed pointing out at supper. She kept a notebook of every bird she saw, neat little entries with the date and the weather, and a sketch if she had time. And she had a way of going still and watching, holding so quiet the water seemed to hold with her, that reminded me so much of Diane, it sometimes stopped me cold in the doorway with a dish towel in my hand. She asked good questions, too, the kind that don't have easy answers. Why is the water colder on the north side? How old is that pine? Who decides where your land stops and the next man starts? I had answers for all three, the last one especially, and she filed them away the way I file paper. I didn't know yet how much that girl was paying attention. I'd find out the morning the trucks came. So that is who was in the house the morning Sharon Delk decided my lake was hers. Pinecrest Ridge was the development that went in on the South Meadow about 8 years back. A man named Roger Delk bought the flat ground from a rancher who had let it go to thistle, and he built 40 homes on it, then 60, then a clubhouse and a gate and a sign with a fake brass plaque. Roger ran the construction company. His wife Sharon ran the homeowners association. And somewhere in the early going, the two of them decided that the lake their buyers could see from the new decks ought to belong to the people paying the dues. Never mind that the water and the land under it had been deeded to my family for the better part of a century. It started small, the way these things do. A letter, the first autumn, on association letterhead, informing me that quote-unquote shoreline structures within the viewshed of the Pinecrest Ridge community were subject to aesthetic review. I read it twice, set it down, and filed it. I did not answer it. I had learned a long time ago, doing the work I did, that you answer a thing like that with a record, not with your temper. That was the founding of the folder. A plain manila folder, the kind I used to carry survey notes in. And I wrote the date on the tab in pencil, and I put the letter inside. By the end, I would need a second folder, and then a banker's box. It started, though, with the one. The second letter came in the spring. This one had a number on it, a fine $250, for what they called an unpermitted structure on community-adjacent water. There was no such thing as community-adjacent water. The lake was mine to the high water line on the north and east, and the survey said so, and the deed said so, and the county map, if anyone bothered to pull it, said so in my own handwriting. I filed the second letter behind the first. 2. I want to be fair to my neighbors here, because most of the people who bought into Pinecrest were decent folks who just wanted a house in the mountains. They did not know the history. They drove past my place and saw an old man and a dock and a no trespassing sign. And Sharon told them I was the holdout, the difficult one, the man standing between them and the lake access she promised in the brochure. A few of them believed her. Most of them, I would learn later, just kept their heads down and hoped the whole thing would settle. I tried the neighborly way first. I want that on the record, too. The summer after the second letter, I walked down to the clubhouse on a Thursday evening when the board met, and I asked to speak. And I told them plainly that the lake was deeded land, that I held the survey, and that I would be glad to show any of them the recorded plat at the county any day they liked. I wore a clean shirt. I brought a single sheet, a reduced copy of the plat, nothing fancy. I was calm. I did not raise my voice. The clubhouse smelled of new carpet and burnt coffee, and there were maybe 20 people in folding chairs and a tray of grocery store cookies nobody was eating. Sharon sat at the head of the table in a navy blazer with a little gold pin shaped like a pine tree, and she let me finish. And then she smiled the way you smile at a child who has said something quaint. "Mr. Brennan," she said, "I appreciate your attachment to your little setup out there. That water, though, is functionally part of our community now, whether the paperwork is caught up or not. We have families here. We have property values. One man's nostalgia doesn't outweigh 60 households." That was the first time I heard her say functionally part of our community. It would not be the last. I set my copy of the plat on the table in front of her, and I said she was welcome to keep it. And she slid it back across the table to me without looking at it. 2 fingers. The way you return a menu you've already decided against. That gesture told me more than the speech did. She did not want the facts. She wanted the room. I went home and I filed my own notes from the meeting, dated and signed. I had started keeping a legal pad in the truck by then, and I wrote down what people said while it was fresh, because a surveyor learns early that memory drifts and the written record holds. Maddie was up when I got back, doing homework at the kitchen table, and she asked how it went. I told her. She asked me that night why I wasn't angrier. I told her anger was easy and useless, and that the lake didn't care how loud I got, it only cared what was written down and recorded. She thought about that for a while, chewing the end of her pencil. Then she asked if she could help me keep the folder. I said yes. I cleared a drawer for her and showed her how I dated the tabs and logged each item on the inside cover. And she took to it like it was the most natural thing in the world. That turned out to matter more than I knew. The third escalation came that fall, and it was the one that told me there was money under all of it. A surveyor I did not recognize showed up at the south end of my property with a transit and a helper, and they set stakes along my fence line, my actual recorded fence line. But the stakes were set 40 feet inside it, on my ground. I walked down and asked him what firm he was with and what he was shooting. He got cagey. He said he was contracted by a development group doing preliminary work on a, quote, lake access easement for a planned expansion. I asked to see the legal description he was working from. He didn't have one with him. I asked him who set his control, what benchmark he was tied to. And he gave me a look that told me he knew I knew the trade, and he wished I didn't. A man shooting a real boundary can tell you his control in his sleep. This one changed the subject. I wrote down his plate, his equipment, the time, and the location of every stake. And that night, I drove the fence line with Maddie holding the flashlight, and we pulled every stake and laid them in a neat row inside my barn, photographed and tagged, 40 of them, each one logged with where it had stood. I did not throw them out. Evidence goes in the box, not the trash. 3. That was when I understood what Pinecrest Ridge actually was. Roger Delk wasn't done building. The flat meadow was full. The only direction left to expand was up the slope toward the water, and the only thing standing between Roger and a second phase of lakefront lots, the expensive kind, the kind with private beach access in the listing, was my 212 acres and the recorded line that said the lake was mine. Sharon's aesthetic review and her finds and her functionally part of our community were never about pine trees and property values. They were about clearing a title so her husband could sell water he didn't own. I did not say any of this out loud to Sharon. I want to be clear about that. I never confronted her with it. Never accused her in front of the neighbors, never gave her the satisfaction of a fight she could describe to the board as me being unstable. I just kept measuring. I pulled my own recorded plat from the county, paid for a certified copy, and I went out with my own equipment. The transit I still kept oiled in the barn. And I reshot the entire north and east boundary myself, corner to corner, monument to monument. Every original iron pin my younger self had driven into that granite 40 years before was still there, exactly where the record said it would be. I photographed each one with the day's newspaper for the date. I was building something, slow and quiet. And the beauty of it was that Sharon thought my silence meant I had nothing. By the second year, the fines had stacked up. They sent them monthly now, certified mail, each one a little higher than the last. 500, then 750, then 1,000. I signed for everyone and I filed everyone, and I paid not a single dollar, because you cannot fine a man for a structure on his own deeded land. And a fine you have no jurisdiction to issue is just a piece of paper that proves you tried. By the end of that year, the folder had become 2 folders, and I had a running tally on the inside cover. 11 fines, 0 paid, 0 owed. The day and time habit served me well that winter. A Saturday morning in February, snow on the ground, hard light coming off it. And a man in an orange vest with a clipboard came up my road and started photographing the dock through the bare trees. I went out in my boots, no coat, and asked who he was. He said he was with County Code Enforcement. I asked for his identification and his badge number. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything, because a real officer hands you the number before you finish the sentence. Then he showed me a laminated card that said, Pinecrest Ridge Compliance Officer, in a font somebody had clearly made on a home printer. The lamination bubbled at one corner where the machine ran hot. There is no such thing as a Pinecrest Ridge Compliance Officer. The county has code enforcement. A homeowners association has nothing of the kind, no authority off its own common ground, and certainly none on my deeded land. I photographed the card, front and back. I photographed him standing there with the dock behind him. I photographed his vehicle, a personal SUV with a magnetic sign on the door that read something official sounding and that he had not quite stuck on straight. The bottom corner peeling up in the cold. Then, while he stood there, I called the actual county on speaker and asked whether they had sent anyone to my address that morning. They had not. The man heard it. He got back in his SUV and left without another word, and the magnetic sign slid another inch on the way down my road. I filed all of it, the photos, the time, the call log. Fake authority is not a small thing. A man impersonating a county officer to intimidate a landowner is a crime in this state, a real one with a real statute. And I noted that in the folder too, in case the day came when somebody official wanted to know. 4. That same winter, the first ally found me. His name was Hank, and he ran the small marina and bait shop on the public boat ramp at the far south end of the basin, the one stretch of shoreline that genuinely was public, county land, the put-in everybody used. Hank had gotten his own letter from Sharon, demanding he stop renting kayaks because the launch was, quote, within the managed recreational zone of Pinecrest Ridge. The county owned that ramp outright. Hank knew it. He drove up to my place one evening with a 6-pack he didn't open and a folder of his own, thinner than mine, but the same idea. And we sat on the dock Diane built and watched the light go off the water and compared notes. 2 folders are better than 1. Hank was a heavy, slow-talking man with a gray ponytail and forearms like mooring posts, and he had been on that lake 20 years, longer than anybody but me. He had watched Roger Delk buy the meadow. He had watched the first 40 houses go up and then the next 20. He had seen the survey crew too, the unmarked one, and he had photos of his own, time-stamped, of the stakes on my fence line, because Hank photographed everything that happened on the water out of pure long habit. "I figured somebody'd want these someday," he said. And he laid them on the dock boards next to mine. And they matched, his angle and my angle, the same 4 men, the same truck. I asked him if he would be willing to say all of it under oath if it ever came to that. He looked out at the lake a long moment. "Walt," he said, "I've been waiting 3 years for somebody to ask me that question. Sharon Delk tried to put me out of business over a county boat ramp she doesn't own. You bet I'll swear to it." He finally opened one of the beers then, and we sat until full dark. And I had a second witness with a second camera and a 20-year memory. 2 folders, 2 cameras. I wrote his name on a fresh tab. The deputy came into it in the 3rd year, and I want to tell this part carefully, because the easy version of this story makes the law the villain, and that is not what happened and not what is true. Her name was Deputy Reyes. She was young, maybe 30, and she got sent up my road one afternoon because Sharon had called in a complaint that I was, in her words, harassing community members and blocking lawful access to a shared waterway. None of that had happened. What had happened was that I told a pair of Pinecrest residents, politely, that the path they were cutting across my land to reach the water was on private property, and they were welcome to use the public ramp at the south end. That was the harassment. Deputy Reyes was professional about it. She explained that when a complaint is filed, she has to respond, regardless of what she personally thinks of it, and that I should understand she wasn't taking a side. She was documenting an allegation. I told her I understood that better than she might expect, and I invited her in, and I showed her the folder. Both folders by then. The certified plat, the photographs of the original monuments with the dated newspaper, the fake compliance officer's homemade card, the unsigned survey stakes set 40 feet onto my land, the 11 fines, 0 paid. She went quiet for a long while, turning the pages. Then she said something I have thought about many times since. She said, "Mr. Brennan, I can't act on most of this today. A lot of it isn't a sheriff's matter. It's civil. It's the county recorder. It's maybe the district attorney if that compliance card is what it looks like. Here's what I'll tell you. The same thing I tell everybody trying to build a case against a pattern of harassment. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Date everything. Photograph everything. When you've got a clear, documented incident where they cross a line that's actually criminal, call me directly and I'll come." She wrote her direct number on the back of a card. I filed that too. That was the moment the whole thing changed shape in my head. It stopped being a pile of grievances and became a countdown. Reyes had told me, without quite saying it, that they would hang themselves eventually, and that my only job was to be ready with the record when they did. So I waited, and I measured, and I kept the folder, and I did not give Sharon Delk 1 inch of the reaction she was fishing for. She gave her speech again that spring, the second time I heard the line in full. The association held what they called a community forum at the clubhouse, and somebody, I suspect Hank, made sure I knew it was happening and that the lake would be on the agenda. I went. I sat in the back. Sharon stood at a podium with a slideshow behind her, renderings of a beautiful lakefront with docks and a swimming area and little sailboats, none of which existed, all of it drawn over photographs of my shoreline. She told the room that the association had been working diligently to bring the lake into community management, that there was, quote, one remaining obstacle, an elderly resident clinging to an outdated claim, and that the board was confident the water would soon be, and here it came again, functionally part of our community. The room applauded. I sat in the back and I did not say a word. I just turned on the little recorder in my shirt pocket, the one I'd told Reyes I would carry. and I let Sharon describe her plan to 60 witnesses in her own voice. Roger spoke after her. He was smoother than his wife, a big man in a quarter zip who talked about Phase 2 and lakefront premium lots and a partnership with the association to deliver, his word, deliver the waterfront the community deserves. He had a rendering too, a slick one, clearly done by somebody he paid. It showed 20 new homes on the slope above my north shore, with private beach frontage and little docks of their own, on land that was mine and water that was mine. And he was selling it to a room full of people, as if the paperwork were a formality. As if my deed were a clerical delay somebody in an office would clear up by spring. A woman in the second row asked when the lakefront lots would be released and what the starting price was. Roger said release was targeted for the following summer, pending what he called final access resolution, and that the premium lots would start in the high six figures. Final access resolution. That was me. That was my deed and Diane's dock and my grandfather's line, reduced to a bullet point on a slide, a thing to be resolved. I had it all on tape, the price, the timeline, the partnership, the whole machine of it. I went home and I filed the recording, and I wrote on the folder tab the date and 3 words, motive, on record. That recording was worth more than any survey stake. A survey proves the land is mine. That tape proved they knew it was mine and meant to sell it anyway. The 4th year is when they crossed the line that Reyes had told me to wait for. It was a Wednesday in July, hot and dry, the lake low and clear. Maddie was 16 by then, home for the summer, out on the dock with her notebook a little after 7 in the morning. I was in the barn. I was in the Makeys. I heard the trucks before I saw them. 2 pickups and a flatbed with a small excavator chained to it, coming up my road and turning down toward the water, toward my shoreline, toward the dock. There were 4 men in Pinecrest polos and a foreman with a clipboard. And they had bolt cutters, and they had a work order. And they were here, the foreman told me when I came down fast from the barn, to remove an unpermitted structure on community-managed water on the authority of the Homeowners Association. Maddie was on that dock. The excavator was coming off the flatbed, and a man with bolt cutters was walking toward my granddaughter and the last thing Diane and I ever built. I have never moved faster in my life, and I have never been more careful to keep my hands at my sides. I put myself between the men and the dock, and I told Maddie, calm as I could make it, to go up to the house and call the number on the card on the kitchen counter and tell Deputy Reyes that Walt Brennan said it was time and to come now. Maddie went. She didn't run scared. She went like she had a job, the way Diane would have. And that steadiness in a 16-year-old is something I will be proud of until the day I die. Then I turned to the foreman, and I did not yell. I said, "You're on private deeded land. That structure is on my property, above my own recorded water line. You cut 1 cable on that dock and you've destroyed private property on a fraudulent work order, and the man who signed it is going to own that. I'd think hard before your saw touches my dock." The foreman looked at his work order. It had Sharon's signature on it and the association's letterhead, and not 1 word of legal authority behind it. He told his men to hold. Smart man. Some of them are. Sharon arrived 10 minutes later in her SUV, the one with the vanity plate dust boiling up behind her, furious that the work had stopped. She came down to the water in a magenta blazer and those white sneakers, and she got right up in my space, finger out. And she said the third thing, the thing I had been waiting 4 years to get on a clean recording with a witness. "This is our lake," she said, loud enough for every man there to hear. "It has always been functionally part of our community, and your little dock and your little claim are finished. I've signed the order. It comes down today." I let her finish. Then I said quietly, "Deputy's on her way. Let's all wait for her." And we did. We stood there in the July heat, Sharon seething, the men shifting, the excavator idling, until the dust came up the road again, and Deputy Reyes's cruiser pulled in, followed, to my surprise, by a second county vehicle I didn't recognize. Here is the part I will tell slowly, because it happened slowly, and the slowness was the whole point. Reyes got out. She took in the scene, the excavator, the bolt cutters, the work order, the 16-year-old now standing on the porch with her phone still recording. She asked the foreman for the work order and read it. She asked Sharon if she had signed it. Sharon, still riding her own momentum, said yes proudly, that she had every right as president to order the removal of an illegal structure on community water. Reyes did not raise her voice. She said, "Ma'am, before anybody does anything, I'm going to ask Mr. Brennan to show us all what he showed me last year." "Walt, you got the folder?" I had the folder. I had brought it down with me in the dry bag because a surveyor learns to bring the record to the site. I walked to the hood of Reyes's cruiser, and I did not make a speech because the paper does not need a speech. I laid down the certified copy of the recorded plat first, then the deed, the chain of title back to 1941, then the photographs of the original iron monuments, dated. And then I laid down the last sheet, the original boundary survey of the entire basin, the recorded one, and I put my finger on the surveyor's seal and signature block at the bottom. And I said the only thing close to a flourish I allowed myself in 4 years. That's the survey that set every line on this lake. It was recorded in 1986. The north and east shore, including the ground the dock stands on and the water out to the original high water line, is deeded to me. And the man who walked that line and signed that survey 39 years ago was me. I'm a licensed surveyor. This is my work. You've been trying to take the lake from the one man who measured it. Nobody said anything. The lake was flat and bright. A jay called once in the pines and went quiet. The man from the second county vehicle stepped forward then, and he turned out to be from the county recorder's office, brought along because Reyes, after our talk the year before, had quietly flagged the Pinecrest fines and that homemade compliance card to people who could do something with them. He looked at the recorded plat, and he looked at the seal, and he looked up at Sharon, and he said plainly, "This survey is the controlling document of record for this basin. There is no community waterway here. This is private deeded property. Any fine or removal order issued against it is void. 11 fines, 0 paid, 0 owed, against 1 recorded survey, signed 39 years before, by the man holding it." I watched Sharon Delk understand it. I watched it move across her face the way you watch weather cross the lake. The work order in her hand stopped being authority and became evidence. She had signed in front of a deputy and a county recorder and 16 witnesses she'd assembled herself, in order to destroy private property she had no right to touch, on water that the official record said belonged to me, surveyed by me. There was no speech I could have given that would have done what that single sheet of recorded paper did just by lying on the hood of a cruiser in the sun. The consequence did not need my help. It fell the way water falls, downhill, on its own. The fake compliance card and the impersonation of a county officer went to the district attorney, along with my photographs and the homemade laminate. The fraudulent work order, signed by Sharon, became the centerpiece of a criminal mischief and attempted property destruction referral. Reyes built the file patiently, the same way I'd built mine, And she told me later that the homemade compliance card was the piece that turned a civil headache into a criminal matter. Because impersonating a county officer is a line the law takes personally. The thing that truly came down, though, was Phase 2. Roger Delk had pre-sold a dozen of those lakefront premium lots on the slope above my North Shore, taken deposits, shown buyers' renderings of private beaches on my land and my water. When the recorder's office formally affirmed that the entire North and East Basin was deeded private property with no public or community access, those lots became worthless overnight. The buyers wanted their deposits back. The bank that had financed Phase 2 called the construction loan. Roger's company, which had bet its expansion on absorbing a lake it never owned, went into default before the first snow. The excavator that had idled at my dock that July sat repossessed in the Pinecrest clubhouse lot for most of the winter. A yellow monument to a plan that ran into a piece of paper. Sharon resigned the presidency before they could remove her. The association, the real homeowners, the decent ones who just wanted a house in the mountains, hired their own attorney, looked at the books, and found that the dues had been quietly funding the survey crews and the legal letters aimed at me, a private vendetta dressed up as community management, run on their money without their knowledge. A woman named Carol from the board, who had voted against the lake scheme twice and been overruled, drove up to my place that fall and apologized on the porch, and I told her she had nothing to apologize for, that she'd voted right when it cost her something. And that's all anybody can do. She and I get along fine now. The path her neighbors used to cut across my land, I had a proper gate put in, and I gave Hank and a handful of the decent ones a key to the public easement at the south end, the one that was always theirs to use anyway. Roger and Sharon sold their own house at the top of Pinecrest the next spring and left the mountain. I am told they moved down to the flat country. I did not watch them go. By then I was not thinking about them much at all. I was thinking about the dock. Maddie and I replaced 2 of the boards that fall, the 2 that had gone soft at the waterline. And we did it the way Diane and I had done it, one at a time, measuring twice and cutting once. Cedar again, because nothing else smells right out there. Maddie is the one who measures now. She holds the tape and reads it off and writes it down before she cuts, and she's good at it, careful, a little impatient with my slowness, exactly the way I was with my father at her age. She found the 1/4-inch dogleg in the 3rd section while we worked, the one where Diane won the argument, and she asked if we should square it up while we had the tools out. I told her no. I told her the story of it, the cedar and the budget and her grandmother setting the pilings herself, and Maddie listened the way she listens to the lake, gone still, and then she said we should leave it. That some lines are right because of who drew them, not because they're straight. She's smarter than I was at 16. She told me that winter she wanted to study surveying, or maybe geology, something with the land in it, and I told her the land would be lucky to have her. She fishes off that dock every dawn she's home. The Notebook of Birds is 3 volumes now, dated and neat, a record of its own. The lake is flat and bright most mornings, and it is hers someday, recorded and clean, with the survey in the box and the box in the dry safe, and the whole chain of it written down where no clipboard can ever reach. So here is what I want to leave you with, because this is the part that matters more than watching Sharon Delk's face fall. If you own land, walk your boundaries. Find your corners. Pull your recorded plat from the county, pay the few dollars for a certified copy, and read it until you understand it. If you don't have a survey, hire a licensed surveyor and get one, and record it. Keep a folder. When somebody sends you a letter you don't agree with, don't answer it with your temper. Answer it with a date and a file. Photograph everything. Write down what people say while it's fresh. If someone shows up claiming authority, ask for the badge, the number, the legal description, and write down every answer and every hesitation. The people who overreach are almost always counting on you not having the paper. Have the paper. The quiet folder beats the loud clipboard every single time. And it is never the speech that wins. It is the record. If you've got a story like this, a clipboard that picked the wrong landowner, drop it in the comments. I read them, and I learned something from nearly every one. Subscribe if you want to stay for the next one, because next week I'm going to tell you about a retired well driller whose HOA tried to condemn the only water source on the mountain, not knowing he held the original water rights filing from before the town had a name. That one ends at a state hearing, and it ends well. Walk your lines, keep your folder. I'll see you next time.